Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay. We've had some technical difficulties, but we are now calling the meeting of the Halton Police Board to order for Thursday, the 28th of April, 2022. Mr. Committee Clerk, Secretary, do we have any regrets today?
Ms. Han is regrets today.
Okay, thank you. Members of the board, are there any disclosures of pecuniary or conflicts of interest to disclose this morning? Don't see any. We do not have, we have our minutes from our meeting held on Thursday, March 31st. They've been circulated to members of the board. Members of the board, do you have any questions, comments, errors, or anything for? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as circulated, please? Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by Nav. Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of the approval of the minutes? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We do not have any presentations in our public agenda this morning, but we do turn to item 3, which is our consent agenda. We have 4 items. Do any members of the board wish to separate anything on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Clark?
Yeah, it would be the audit report, Mr. Chair.
The audit report, anything else?
And 3-4, please.
3-4, okay. Anything else? So that would leave 3 and 3-1. Can I get a motion to approve those 2 recommendations, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Nav, and seconded by Kurt. You're going to be doing a lot of moving and seconding, I suspect. I've got our other friends here on the monitor. Just to the technical folks, I'm not seeing my members except in small. Is there a way? Can I change my screen here? I guess I can do that myself, right? Yeah. The idea is to be able to see everybody. Let's change the view here, and I'll get right back to you. There we go. We've got a motion to approve 3.1 and 3.3. Are there any questions, comments?
Can you hear me, Jeff?
Sean, do you have something?
Yes, I had a question around Halton happenings, if possible, please.
Okay, so let's go one at a time then. 3.1, Halton happenings. Don, you have.
Right, just acknowledging the Youth Week starting next week in Oakville, May 1 to 7th, but under the heading of Youth in Policing Initiatives. There are 8 Halton students being hired for the summer. Can the chief or someone give us a little more background as far as being hired? I don't see that many hired positions for youth, and this could be something interesting.
Yeah, no, certainly through the chair. We do the YIPI program each year, and we have Inspector Craddock here. Or did she just step outside? Okay, it's a regular program, Mr. Foster, that we do here. We bring them in here for a variety of experiences. One of them is actually the leader of the program. And it's also done in other police services as well. So Inspector Craddock's just come back in, but we're just talking about the, very generally about the YIPI program, if you wanted to add anything to that.
I think that's going to be me. My name is Rick Judson. I'm Sergeant in the Regional Community Mobilization Bureau. So the YIPI program is the Youth in Policing Initiative. It's a provincial program where we get funding through the government, through the Solicitor General, to hire state youth throughout the summer. We give them opportunities throughout the summer to build leadership capabilities, work with the police, and work with the community. Just to the staff, I'm just gonna, when you do speak, I think we're gonna have you come to the podium, because I don't think our friends outside can see you when you're speaking. You're like a disembodied voice. Don, is that
yeah, that's bravo. Great initiative. Thank you very much.
Av, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Don, for separating out this item. I had a question about the cultural sensitivity training. There was a piece of the report that talked about several tours and meet and greets at the Hindu temple in Oakville, and I was just wondering, like, why specifically the Hindu temple? Why not the mosque? And is this like a rotating program? Do the new recruits visit, different places of worship? And have you connected with, for example, in Oakville, we have the Interfaith Roundtable, which is all of our, many of our diverse communities, and different religious groups on kind of one round table that you could possibly connect with to do additional sensitivity training.
Yeah, Inspector Craddock's just going to come to the microphone, might be easier, but we do interact with all of the different faith paths, often at the various mosques. And we also have our Chiefs Diversity Committee, which has been long-standing, where we have representation across a variety of our religious partners. And Inspector Craddock's here now.
Good morning, everyone. So I actually sit on the Interfaith Committee, and we meet a couple of times a year. The latest tours that we did were just based on availability and being able to get a certain amount of officers through in a time period. So we're very connected with all of the different faith groups, and just not even just faith groups. We recently just sent officers into the Perry Sound area to actually do ride-alongs in Indigenous communities. So doing a lot of really different initiatives, things that we haven't done before. And throughout the year we have diversity training. We run it a couple of different times throughout the year, and it just really depends on sort of what's on the agenda and what we can fit in. But that was just the groups that we were able to connect with and make those plans with. But moving forward, there's connections happening all the time. So
Great. That's what I thought. Thank you so much for the additional information.
welcome.
Thanks, Beth. Would you mind taking your hand down on your Zoom display? Kurt, you're up next.
I was just wondering if there might be opportunities for members of the board to attend some of these events. Is that appropriate or not appropriate?
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea, and it would really actually give you a bit of an idea firsthand of some of the diversity training that we're doing with our members and how we're connecting with different groups within the community. So if that's something, then we can definitely table that and make that a consideration and send out the invites.
Yeah, no, that would be wonderful. Thanks.
If you can coordinate that through Graham, that'd be wonderful.
For sure, we will do that.
Anything further on 3.1? I don't see anything else. I had a motion from Nav and Kurt for the approval of the receipt of 3.1. Are there any objections? That is carried. Thanks very much. 3.2. Did somebody separate 3.2?
No.
Clark did. Clark, 3.2?
It was 3.3, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the, thank you, moved by Nav, seconded by Clark. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 3.3, Clark?
Yes, thank you. It would be through you, Mr. Chair, to the chief or the deputies or whoever he feels is appropriate. It talks about the compliance rate of being 89%. It says about the ones that were non-compliant were returned to the report to the appropriate commander to ensure rectification and future compliance. After they go back to the commander, is there a time frame for them to be able to get those ones back into so that they're 100% compliant? And I'm just curious about that process to get it back to make sure that whatever is being handled is actually 100% compliant. So, and I know it might seem like, when we have the report, it's just, curiosity, because somebody asked me about this and I said, I really don't know as to what happens when something is non-compliant, as to how it gets rectified.
Yes, through the chair, there is follow-up to make sure that it is addressed. 100% in some compliance areas is evasive, because a lot of when I first started to look at these audit reports and the 89, 90%, you think of major things that are somehow out of place. A lot of times what we find is these are minor things that are found during vehicle inspections, and there's not an appropriate number of hypothetically bandages in an emergency kit. So it's not major things, but even those little things could become important. So if you look after the little things, the big things look after themselves. So long story short, it does come back and it is looked at again. And I think in this particular report, there's even mention of one item which was sent for to be fixed and has not yet. So you can see where that's gone.
Thank you for that, Chief, because now what is actually is there a target rate that you have for compliance the first go around? Like it says it's 89%, and you just indicated that to get 100% the first go around is very tough. Like, is there a number that we actually hope to achieve when we have everything out for compliance on the first go around?
Well, I think in an ideal world, it would be 100%, and we would clear 100% of crimes as well. So it's interesting that the compliance rate this year is up slightly, I believe, from last year, but we don't have a number. On the flip side of that, it actually shows that the audit people are doing what they should be doing when they find things that are out of place. So it's sort of a win-win, as long as it's not something major, which is going to cause real issues. That's different.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Claire. I have a question with respect to this report as well. Provincial Offences Notice, there's an outstanding matter with respect to e-ticketing. Can you just get an update on what the time frame is for that? I think it's a pilot project, is it, that we're working towards?
Go ahead, Ron. Speak to that.
To the Chair, we currently have our Strategic Management Office considering a couple vendors that are in-house already. Niche, our records management system being one, and the other one is Smart Squad that currently delivers our electronic notes. So there's opportunities for our organization to explore both of those. We want to make sure we make the best business decision and understand our sustainable costs related to that. So we are currently working through our Strategic Management Office to assess those. Those recommendations on next steps are coming back to the Office of the Chief in 2 weeks, and we'll be able to provide an update after that to the board.
What's the, why would there be a flag, or not a flag, but why was this brought to the, why was this flagged on the audit in terms of what's the value of moving to an ticketing type of system for POA matters?
That's a great question. So electronic notes minimizes the number of people that actually have to touch a ticket. So I'm an officer and I write a ticket and I submit it in a box, and someone has to pull it out and actually enter the data into our records management system. So you're entering data twice, sometimes 3 times. Electronic notes done electronically in your car, it gets submitted right through to your records management system, and you reduced that user error or human error, and you've improved accuracy and legibility. So it's obviously the right step forward. We just want to make sure that through this analysis, we make the right decision for our organization.
And this would be a similar system to what the municipality is using for their parking infraction notices, I assume? That it's based on that concept that...
It's well, way more robust than that, because there's interfaces with our court system, which improves disclosure pieces, and there's just a lot more efficiency built into it than the parking analogy. But we're looking forward to sharing what we end up doing with the board.
I imagine that it would result in a greater conviction rate too, when there's not mistakes made on tickets and stuff.
Absolutely. And the other benefit, we want to look at what the benefit is for the frontline officers. In some of these systems, they're able to swipe the driver's license now and populate the ticket instead of sit there and write them. And sometimes you see it recently with some of our dump truck, commercial vehicle sorts of things where there's 10 offenses. You'd be writing out 10 tickets. Here it would populate the 10 and then you'd fill in what the offense was. So it will greatly reduce human error in the completion of those tickets as well. Send the ticket to the courts, send the ticket to our records management system so that people aren't doing all that duplicate data, as Deputy mentioned.
Makes perfect sense. Does this require additional equipment in the vehicles, or is this something that dovetails with our current tough book system in the cars?
The additional infrastructure pieces will be printers.
Right.
And then when you look at that, we don't want them simply for a ticket, when you can print out release documents for criminal matters and other pieces of like documentary evidence or service items. So again, it's a very complex process, but when we make that decision, it will consider all those complexities and a good business model moving forward.
Well, they could potentially really good investment at the end of the day. Terrific, thank you. Yeah, Fred.
With regards to POA tickets, I did a study of that about a decade ago when it eclipsed $1 billion province-wide. And essentially, the vast majority of it was stuff that wasn't followed up at all levels and outside the police, through the justice system, through the municipalities. So anything you can do to tighten that up, obviously, will reduce the likelihood of things slipping through the cracks. My question, though, is about the 42 areas of focus areas for audit. Are those consistent with the adequacy standard areas? Yeah, okay. And so presumably within there, somebody has said all those different regulations say you got to check this, you got to check. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Hence, that's where the numbers. That's correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Britt. Now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a question around, I'm not sure if I've asked this question before, but on the audit process, is there a root cause analysis trending being performed?
In terms of like the errors or the non-compliance pieces?
Fine. So for example, if there's an issue, each issue is identified to root cause, when it's investigated to what is the likely root cause or the root cause, and there's trend analysis to that so you could determine systematic failures or things of that nature. Is there something like that done?
Again, the bulk of what is non-compliant is equipment related, and it's equipment in our frontline vehicles. So it's an officer using something, throwing it away after it's used rightfully, and then someone not knowing to replace it, and then it's caught during the audit. That's the biggest trend that I see when I read these every year. And there's people working and checking cars, civilians checking our vehicles, making sure they have everything that they need, but that by and large is the majority.
So just to clarify, the procedure, your internal processes for handling and closing out audits involve investigation and root cause analysis, corrective actions. And those root cause analyses are trended to determine what are the, categories of issues going on and how to fix them. That's by process is the question.
I believe we do all those things, we just don't call it that. But
and what is it that, what do we call it?
Well, I mean, we go through the process of checking it, correcting it, looking where the human error was that piece of equipment wasn't in the vehicle. I have never called it trending, but that's just words.
I would suggest this is a really good way to determine systematic failures, and that in the entire audit process. It allows one to determine where to focus their energies on, and that's something that I would recommend highly.
To the chair, it's a great point, and the reality is we are trying to address the human error piece because with 800 plus audits that need to be done, not one individual, it's certain people in different districts and buildings having to do these types of audits. And when you're missing a flare from a flare box that requires 20, that is non-compliant, and then what happens is it's rectified right away. So we don't have significant risk to bring forward to the board in terms of these pieces. We have amazing people who work in our quality assurance and our audit unit, and we receive regular reports to identify what those issues are. As we begin to create electronic systems to track and do these types of data entry, we will reduce those. And that's where some of the narrative in the report speaks about those opportunities of leveraging technology to assist us to reduce those error rates and increase compliance.
So all of these non-conformances are captured by software, or is that manual process?
The auditing is manual. It goes into a database. What we're trying to do is create a system where it's all electronic. And that will allow us to do better analytics on those types of pieces. But I can tell you, working in the district and in different various units throughout my career, is that it is a human error piece. Because you're asking John to go and do an audit, and they might miss something. It might be there, but they just didn't see it in the trunk of the car, for example.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get Kurt?
No, I just want, I'm trying to clarify something in my own mind. I think there are two kinds of audits, are there not? There are comprehensive audits that are programs or units or whatever, and then there's a compliance audit. And what you're reporting on here really are the compliance pieces. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
As determined by adequacy standards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kurt, would you mind giving me a motion to receive? Thank you. Seconded by? Thank you, Nev. Further comments or questions? All in favor of the receipt? That's carried. Carried, thank you very much. Moving on to the quarterly human resources summary, I believe that was separated as well. Kurt, you have the
Yes,
floor,
I
sir.
did. I noticed that there are 35 vacancies, or you're 35 under strength, 11 on the uniform side, but you have a graduation that's coming up here next month. What caught my eye was the 24 civilians, and that's probably, what, a 6 or 7 or 8% shortfall, and I just wondered if there are any challenges in that area on the civilian side.
Yes, and through the chair, when the class of recruits graduated, just speaking with the deputy, we would be 10 over for a while.
Yeah.
And that ebbs and flows, as all police services do. We have a number of vacancies on the civilian side. Some of them we're actively recruiting for and trying to fill. A pay duty clerk, a disability return to work specialist in the human resource area, and we may be going back out to market for that one because it hasn't resolved itself. We have a couple of others where we have we had an executive assistant. I'll just give the board an example. We had an executive assistant in our professional standards branch, Nancy, who is exceptional there. She competed for and was successful in becoming one of the executive assistants to the deputies and I. She is an exceptional worker, and she is going to retain the professional standards work, so we will be able to retool those dollars into another priority position. So that's a vacancy right now that we have that we don't plan to fill that particular vacancy, but that may become another higher priority need within human resources, and there'll be a human resources update and report to the board in the near future. But there are some vacancies in our dispatch center, and that's an area where I think we may have to start looking on the uniform side too, at more experienced people than we ever have before. We've always hired almost 100% brand new dispatchers and trained them, but it's hard to get enough people in there. So we may have to, sort of put the word out to other police services that Halton is interested in experienced dispatchers, and some of them from other services are probably living in our area, and it may be mutually beneficial. So, yeah, and we are just about to hire 5 or 6 experienced constables from, I believe, 5 different services, which is fun between chiefs because we do that to each other. But we're looking forward to that experience coming online as well.
All right, if they're coming this way.
That's right.
Not okay if it's going the other way. What about the technical areas, Chief?
Sorry?
The technical areas. Is it difficult to hire into some of the technical areas? I know you're talking about dispatching and stuff, and I suppose that is technical, but I'm thinking some of the more sophisticated technical areas. Are there challenges there?
Yes, absolutely, and I often speak about the IT area specifically as one of the technical areas, but when we're looking at wanting a civilian member who may need 10 or 20 years of experience in IT to fill a role here, that role is most likely within the regular police association, which comes with some very tight controls. So a new member here, no matter what their experience, if they're in the regular association, they get 2 weeks vacation. And dealing with CEOs and executives from different firms, sometimes they have the flexibility to be able to say, you're brand new with us, but you get 4 or 5 weeks vacation, and you get this benefit and that benefit. And we are somewhat tied here to the collective agreements for the associations. And they're hard pressed to say, well, we understand that, so give this person 4 weeks when all of their other members get 2 weeks. So it is a battle on the human resource side, I would say, and not on the uniform side, but on our civilian side, when this position requires significant experience, and oh, by the way, you get 2 weeks vacation, it's hard to get people.
I know I'm hearing from others that the technical, the IT market is tight, and I think there's a lot of competition, and I'm just curious as to how you're going to address that going forward, that's all.
Kurt, anything further on 3.4? Seeing none, would you mind giving me that motion, please, Kurt? Thank you very much. Seconded by? Thank you, Nav. Appreciate it. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we move on to discussion items. We have 3 this morning. Number 1 is financial conditions and activities policy. I believe, Fred, are you leading off on this?
Yes, sir. So if you recall, this was introduced at the last meeting and sent back to staff to clarify one of the articles. The proposed policy replaces 5 bylaws and existing bylaws and policies, so it consolidates them. The main change was that was requested was clarification of the submission process for the budgets to regional council. In the attached draft policy, I've highlighted the 3 areas where changes have been made. In addition to the one the board directed, there was 2 other areas brought forward, one from the service, 5.9, about reallocation within the budget. And to clarify, that's per line item, right? $100,000 reallocation limit per line item. As opposed to total. Yes. Yeah. And thank you, Paul. And I've also assigned the preparation of the governance budget in here. Those regarding the specific request of the board, it's 5.2, which now reads the chief shall prepare the board approved annual operating budget with the approved governance budget attached, along with the capital budget and the 10-year capital forecast for the chair's signature and submission to regional council in the format identified by the region. That's a proposed policy.
Thank you. Questions? Kurt?
I have a question, Mr. Chair, if I may. We use the term material change, material issue, materiality becomes an issue in this policy, and I'm just wondering if the term itself is clear. I mean, should we be defining materiality, or is it clear enough? I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Well, standards can be set. I would suggest that if we did, we'd have to be setting those types of standards everywhere where materiality would apply. It's a judgment call.
Unless defined, it is a judgment call.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. My question. Certainly in the procurement bylaw, there's lots of clarification on that.
But even in audit or other fields, right? We talk about materiality, and we don't define materiality. I'm just wondering if the board feels we should define it. I think it would be clearer, but I may be the only one that feels that way.
Anybody else have comment now?
So I maybe clarify for the board, I guess, what is referred to as materiality?
Can you point me to the article, Kurt?
No, I don't. I can't get it up.
5.8. Right?
Yeah.
5.8.
Material deviation.
Really, you're just talking about substantial, I think, right? In that clause 5.8.
So in this case, it would be, 5.9 is one of those. So if there's any required transfers that exceed $100,000, that would be a material difference.
What do our auditors require in terms of materiality for? They're using GAAP standards, I assume. So, what would that be?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The region manages the audit overall, and their materiality is in the millions. So anything that's in our
How is that calculated? It's based on a percentage, or how is it?
In the municipal world, I believe it's on a percentage of the item to the budget and the tax base.
Right. So 100,000 would be well under that.
Correct.
Even in our context.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And to add some additional information, the prior version in one of the policies and bylaws referred to a capital variance of 10% or $100,000, and essentially any operating variance which would throw us into a deficit position. Touch wood, we've never been in a deficit position. And capital variances are managed at the region level as well. So we don't necessarily need to articulate what our capital variance materiality would be, because we have to follow the regions as well.
Speaking of which, I just want clarification. Would this be satisfactory to our auditors, these standards?
Good question. I will put it to the region, but I would imagine yes. I mean, there are no gap changes in here, and their materiality is certainly yeah.
Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, I think so. I think that answers my curiosity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Always want to make the auditors happy. Chief, you had a comment?
Yeah, it's more of like a general discussion point for the board, and we talked about it just before the meeting. I look at this and I think if there's $100,000 that we're going to transfer for a one-time purchase of something that we didn't plan for, and we're taking it out of this area, if it's over $100,000, it's always been to come to the board for that approval. But we have other areas of the budget where they click along month to month, and one area is over budget every month, and the other area is under budget every month. At the end of the year, it could be $700,000 or $800,000, but the board is updated on that through our financial reports all the way along, and there's no way that I could seek approval for that. So the example is, we always purposely under budget for overtime, and we're always under budget for staff dollars. And overtime is really staff dollars. But my point has always been here and every other service I've been in, if I increased the overtime budget by $800,000, which would be justified, it would cut 8 police officers from being hired. And at the end of the day, it all gets paid, and it's paid every 2 weeks through the region. So I just want the board members to know that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sort of material or substantial transfers of funds for one-time sorts of purchases and things like that. Okay, thank you.
Is that okay, Kurt?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. That's fine.
Anything further on this? I have a couple minor things I'd like to raise. Anybody on Zoom? No. On item 3 under requirements, I'm just wondering if a minor wording change could be considered, Fred. Instead of insist on, can we use the word require? Signed by the chair where required. Instead of insist on, it seems clearer to me. So it would read in 3.
Well, often they require the chair if they require a signature for the board.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're insisting on it, though, right? That is the chair.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if it's required, if they require it, then I think it's reasonable that the chair should sign it. No?
This is the whole point about whether you want to sign it, and your successors want to sign every document, or if you want to have the routine ones delegated, right?
Well, I think if it's required, though, I mean, I think that means that the funder requires it, so I don't think it's not really optional at that point. I just don't want to be in the position of sort of debating with them, and I think a good chair is going to make sure that they're part of signing a document, the part of the chair also is a part of awareness of what's being signed on behalf of the board, so I don't have a problem with that. So that's a minor change. The other one was, let me just find it here. Can you just clarify, and this relates directly to your responsibilities, Mr. CGO, on 5.2 it says, with the approved governance budget attached. Why did you choose that particular language for a reason?
Yes, because the legislation says we have to submit the budgets for the services operating costs and the reports operating costs separately. It also says that we have to do it in the format required by the municipality, and our municipality wants to merge, right? So trying to satisfy both somewhat competing sets of rules set out in legislation, that I think that does that. Hey, Paul, would you agree?
Yes, that works for me. Just one, I just noticed it was in brackets. It just seemed, the call out was interesting. I just wanted to get clarification on that. Thank you. That was, that's good. Anything further on our policy? Are we prepared to approve it today? I'm not seeing any further comments. Nobody on Zoom. Kurt, are you prepared to move approval?
I am.
Thank you. Another policy about to be approved. This is exciting now. Thank you very much. Seconded. Last chance for comments or questions. Clark, I see your hand, or are you just trying to second? Okay. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Another one done. Thank you. Well done, Fred. Was Svetlana helping with this one as well? Yes. Well, thank her as well for us. 4.2, limited tendering for Motorola Critical Connect licenses. Does anybody have any questions on this, or are we prepared to? I'm prepared to move it. Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by Nav. Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. 4.3 is Motorola backhaul support services and additional Critical Connect licenses.
I'm prepared to second, Mr. Chair, if my colleague Natalie will.
We're going to switch it up. That's very exciting. So is that okay with you now?
I don't know, let me think about that.
Okay. We can play some consideration music while you're thinking?
Yes, I'm prepared now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded with some comments included. We appreciate that. Is there any further comments or questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Operational verbal updates. Mr. Chief?
Just a couple short ones. It's interesting, I was approached by an instructor at Mohawk College who was a member of our service for many years, and they have a need for a used out-of-service police vehicle. We would like to donate one to them, so it'll be there with the Halton crest on it when the Mohawk Justice Police Study students are going through their training. Give them another nudge in the right direction when we want them to come here. So that's just something that we're doing, but we wanted the board to be aware of that. We did do, we had one of our staff sergeants come forward requesting if we could in any way assist the tragedy in the Ukraine with equipment of various types. So we did have a look at some surplus equipment types of things that we would not need here, but we also put a call out to our members to turn in, for example, some used police boots and gloves and a variety of equipment. So it was fairly successful, and they were able to, I believe that's been delivered now through I think it was a church in the Burlington area. So it was a good initiative by our members that we're very thankful for. The last thing I just want to mention publicly, not to go into a lot of detail, but there is a new National Cybercrime Unit that's up and running nationally. It kind of mirrors and is set up and similar to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Organization. It's an exciting initiative which actually comes about through the National Police Service, National Advisory Committee, which is sort of arm's length with the RCMP. Steve White just retired actually, and more on that in a minute. But so it's been exciting to be involved in this. But one of the main needs that we have as a policing entity in this country is to have people report cybercrime. So when there is a case of ransomware, sometimes more and more companies are going to insurance and they're negotiating with these cyber terrorists to try to get their systems back up and running or their data back available to them. And there's a variety of different cybercrime, obviously, that's taking place. But there's a vast underreporting of cybercrime. So the message for our public, and we'll be putting it out through social media here in Halton and nationally, is please report cybercrime so that we get a better handle on it, the magnitude of it. And there will be trends in that. We're where more reporting will ultimately help us do better investigations. So that's just a message for the public.
It's a good message, one that I recently learned myself through my private sector business. I hadn't reported, probably for the same reason a lot of people don't report, because it's, it's international. We didn't feel anybody could do anything about it, that it was an insignificant item in the grand scheme of things. And when you really dig into this, you find out that that's totally wrong, that notwithstanding whether or not it can be investigated by the local police organizations, that it can certainly be reported internationally and it can be tracked, et cetera. So certainly I'm a reformed victim, and I hope that others will take that message as well. And I hope that the police service can find ways to communicate that, particularly to our business community, many who suffer in silence on these issues. It's quite tragic because of the cost and the loss of productivity that it results in. So thank you for that. Anything from our deputies?
Not in closed session.
Okay, we do have one item, receipt of public correspondence. On Dilla Trust, you received your public correspondence. Members of the board, is there anything to raise at the board, or are you satisfied to move receipt of the public correspondence? I'm not seeing any motions to list anything from the roster. I'm not seeing anything on Zoom. Can I get a motion to receive, please? Thank you, Clark and Pav. Thank you very much. All in favor? That's received. Thank you. New business. Clark, you have an item of new business for us.
Well, it's as I indicated to you yesterday, Mr. Chair, and to the chief, was I had a email from the Halton Region Federation of Agriculture concerned about an increase in a individual has gone to 4 farms so far and attempting to open up farm gates to let out livestock. And they were concerned about that as well. And they, the question they asked, and Chief, you can take this back, and if you don't have the answer today, was about the Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act. And they were asking specifically about if charges can be laid under that as opposed to simple trespass because they're that much greater. And they were really worried, especially about with road safety, if animals are being let out onto the road. So they asked me if I could raise that at the meeting today, and I did send the information over to the chief. So Chief, I'm not sure if you have a comment on that now or if it's something you'd want to regroup and come back with.
I usually have a comment, but it's an interesting one. I have Ken here from our legal area. We'll have a look at it. The actual act, of course, was in part because of things like the processing plant in Burlington with the various protests and blocking and potential harm to the animals that are in those trucks when they're home. That's Appleby and Fairview. I still call it the Fearman's plant, but it's a large processing plant. I'm not sure that would apply to someone opening the gate at a farm, but we'll have a look at that. There's got to be something there for that offense. I'm just not sure if it would be that act.
Thank you for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are provisions in the Act that deal with mischief on farms. So it's meant to expand the concept of trespass on actual agricultural land. So we'll have, as the chief said, it's something that the staff will look into.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, Chief and Deputy, for that as well. And I think it might also be good for maybe if even contacting through to the Halton Federation and having you present at one of their meetings as what they can do to make it more secure, so that when they have the gates that, to stop people from doing this. That might be the other part of the equation, but thank you for the response.
And I have not received any information on this yet, Clark, so maybe it's an email that's in transit, but is it a number of incidents or just one farm or?
It was 4 incidents on 4 separate farms. I will send it over to you again, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for raising that, Clark. Anything else under new business, members of the board? I don't see anything. I do have one item. I want to say Happy Volunteer Week to all police service volunteers. It's National Volunteer Week from April 24th to 30th. And on behalf of the board, I want to acknowledge the volunteers that participate in the Halton Regional Police Service, and to those of us who are unpaid on the board, just a little aside, and say thank you very much for your time and effort and your contributions to our community. You certainly deserve all the recognition that's warranted. So with that, members of the board, I'm going to move on, and we are moving to a closed session. So I need a motion to move to a session closed to the public. Members of the board, can I get that?
I think we have the action registry.
Yes, action.
I skipped right by the action registry.
Sorry.
Yes, I did. No, don't apologize. Thank you for holding me to account for that. Action registry, there we go. Members of the board, the action registry has been circulated. It appears from casual glimpse here that we are up to date. Members, do you have any questions or comments on that?
Yes, I have one, Mr. Chair. Please. We talked about the complaint management that we referred to a workshop, and I'm just wondering if we were any closer to setting a date for the workshop. There are a couple of other things in other action registries where there's no date set, and just wondering if we could focus a little bit on that.
Fred, can you help us with that?
Yes. So the concept of workshops every 2 months was set last month. So was a bunch of policies that required. Some of them are draft before you in board only, and the presentations resuming. So what we have coordinated the presentations for the rest of the year. We're working on the next workshop in June, which is the facilities tour, and we've not scheduled the rest at this time. This will be one of them, that's why it's on the action registry.
No?
Sorry, just a clarification. So the workshop for the complaint will be this year, or?
Like I said, we haven't scheduled it yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on the action registry? Take a motion to receive, please. Thank you, Pat. Seconded by? Pat, thank you very much. All in favor? That's received. Thank you very much. Now, going back to what I said before, we need to move into closed session. I need a motion for that, please. Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by Nav. Thank you very much. And we are all in favor? Thank you. To those watching, we are moving into a session closed to public to deal with matters of a confidential nature. To those who are watching us this morning, to those on the internet that are observing the business of your Halton Police Board, I want to thank you for your interest and your participation this morning. We will be back next month with our next board meeting, and we do appreciate you taking the time to keep an eye on your police governors this morning. So with that, members of the board, we will take a brief recess while we set up the room for a confidential session, and we will be back with you very shortly. Thank you, everybody.